I heard a story once. A certain Jew who wasn't observant once came into a shul, to a synagogue. He listened to the prayers, he looked a little bit at the Seder, the prayer book, but nothing spoke to him. And then just as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard the Shliach Tzibur, the person in charge of the prayers, saying the Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkada shmei rabba v'alma divrach heroteh v'amlich malchuteh, and so on. And the words are in Aramaic, they're not in Hebrew. He didn't know what they meant. But listening to those words, they felt like some mysterious spell to him, like a whisper from another world, something that's magical. And that sparked his attention, that entered his heart. And it was this spiritual experience of listening to those magical, ancient Aramaic words that put him on the journey of tshuva, of returning to Judaism, and he ended up becoming observant and observing all the commandments and so on. Many people arrive or rediscover Judaism just like the person in this story. Just like him, they know very little about the world of Torah, and their interest is sparked at first by words or phrases or images that they don't understand. Many times this comes from these images or words, they come from the literature of Kabbalah, especially the book of Zohar, which is written in Aramaic and is full of mystery and mystique. As they learn later on, they begin to study those words, and they learn Hebrew, they learn Aramaic, and they learn what they mean. And the original sense of mystery, at least regarding those words, may dissipate. But always, their memory is engraved with this image, with this experience of this special moment, unique moment in their lives, that they first felt that within this whole world of Judaism and the Torah, there is a divine wonder. There's something wondrous that is beyond their understanding, beyond their reason, and that's what, put them on their journey, and in many ways keeps them going, because they have this memory that's engraved within them. Now, a question we could raise is: did these people really go through a deep spiritual experience, or were they misled by a superficial and external impression? Many people today, including many people who are believers, and often it is people who define themselves as rationalistic religious people, or they follow the Rambam, Maimonides, they see him as the central figure. They often say that this experience of wonder that's directed at the unknown is vacuous. Some people tend to say this. They say what makes us human, what makes us special, the highest faculty within the human being is the faculty of reason, the faculty of understanding. That's what makes us different than animals. That's what makes adults different than little kids. And that person who was impressed by the music or the ambience of the words of the Kaddish, he was just misled, or he was impressed by something that's very superficial. And had he understood the words, he would have seen that they're not so mysterious, they're not magical, they have a very, very simple meaning, and that's what makes you special, is that you have the intellect. And excitement is something childish, and being excited or being hypnotized by some experience that you don't understand, that's not what you should aspire to, and that's not what should lead you in your life. But according to the Kabbalah and Chassidut, the inner dimension of the Torah, this is really a big mistake. It is true that just the sense of wonder, of this amazement and astonishment regarding something that's unknown, is not enough. And one must always aspire to learn and to understand more and more. On the other hand, this feeling of wonder is something incredibly valuable. It serves as a reminder that beyond what we know, there are an infinite amount of secrets that we don't know yet, that God and His Torah are really infinite, and they can never be fully attained. This feeling, not only is it vital, but woe to us if we ever stop experiencing this feeling. We need to bear it in mind, to have this experience somehow accompany us at all times. This is hinted at in a beautiful verse in Ecclesiastes. Is Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 8. And it says, at every moment should your clothes be white, be clean, and also make sure that your head never lacks oil. There should always, your hair should be anointed with oil. Right? In previous times, that's how they cleaned their hair, and they gave it good smell. And so this is like an advice that one should wear clean clothes, and one should have oil over one's head or in one's hair. But every verse we need to go in a deeper way. So this image of an oil over your head, that when you must never go without it, you must never lack this this image or this feeling of having oil in your head. How can we understand it in a deeper way? So according to Kabbalah and Chassidut, the Torah has three basic levels, and they correspond to something that's mentioned several times in the Torah, which is that the Torah talks about your grain, your wine, and your oil. These are three things that we want to be blessed. We want God to bless our grain, that we should have bread, and our wine, and our oil. Deganecha tiroshcha veitzarecha. That's how it goes in Hebrew. And we say it every day in the Kriyat Shema. So these three foods, right, grain, wine, and oil, really correspond to three levels in the Torah. So the grain corresponds to the revealed level of the Torah. This is when you learn halacha, Jewish law, and when people in the yeshiva, they learn Gemara. All this is part of the Nigle Torah, and it's like bread, because that's what gives us sustenance. That's what makes Jewish life. That's the basis of the foundation of all Jewish life. Then wine corresponds to Kabbalah, to the esoteric wisdom. Wine in Hebrew, we use the term Deganecha tiroshcha veitzarecha, tirosh. But the other more common word is yain, and yain, the numerical value of this word is 70, which also equals the Hebrew word sod. Sod means secret or mystery. So the Kabbalah is called the wisdom of secrets or mystery. It's called Torah Sod. So the idea is that bread, that's like the revealed level of the Torah, the Nigle. But wine is like the Kabbalah. Wine elevates us. When we drink wine, it's going beyond the meal, and it elevates us to the higher levels that we can fathom the secrets of the Torah. So what does oil stand for? So this is the most interesting. Oil stands for something called Razin de Razin. These are the secrets of secrets. This is another level of secrets, which is even higher than the level of wine. When you think about oil, you see that it has two properties. That it's very, very interesting. And you can see those two properties when you compare or when you combine oil with the other two elements we spoke about, bread and wine. So when you put oil on wine, just like water, it floats. Oil floats on wine. So the metaphor is that the secrets of secrets, the deeper secrets of Kabbalah, the higher secrets, they're even higher, just like oil floats above wine. On the other hand, when you put oil into bread, it seeps down into it. It makes the bread richer and have a greater, more taste to it, more flavor, and it becomes just rich and it stops being so dry. So this is unique. You don't put wine into bread, but you do put oil into bread. So oil has this dualistic property of floating above wine. These are secrets that are higher than wine, but they also go down. They seep into the bread. They go into the revealed level of the Torah. So the Hasidic explanation is that this oil really stands for the Torah of Chassidut itself, right? Chassidut is, on the one hand, it's part of Kabbalah. It's the latest stage in the evolution of Kabbalah, and Kabbalah was aimed at very special people, the Mekubalim, the students of Kabbalah, and they had to learn many years, and it was very esoteric. The wisdom of Chassidut has exactly this dual property. On the one hand, it touches upon secrets that are even deeper and higher than the secrets of Kabbalah. Because it's the latest stage in the evolution of Kabbalah. So evolution means we're going up, more and more up, higher and higher, and we're understanding things that are deeper about God and about reality and about the Torah. On the other hand, the object of Chassidut isn't to just float up there somewhere above. The object is to seep down into our hearts, into our lives, into our bread, into the revealed level of the Torah, the pshat of the stories, the routine life of observing the commandments and doing the halacha, the Jewish law, performing all these acts. So it's just a beautiful thing that when we're talking about grain, wine, and oil, we're talking about the revealed level of the Torah, grain, and then Kabbalah, the esoteric wisdom, that's wine, and then oil is the highest secrets, which is really also Chassidut. It floats above, but it also seeps down and becomes something that's very relevant to our everyday lives and to understanding even the most simple things about the Torah. In many ways, you can say it combines the bread and the wine. The oil going into the bread is like a combination of the revealed level of the Torah and the hidden level of the Torah. So going back to the verse from Ecclesiastes, what does it mean that you should never lack oil on your head? So on your head could also be read as above your head. And the idea is that we can now read it in such a manner. The verse is really telling us that we should always walk around with a feeling of awe and mystery and wonder regarding the Razin de Razin, the secrets of the Torah, and this experience should always sort of float, or we should experience that it's above our heads, but it's also pouring down into our heads. It starts from above our heads. It's something that's super rational, super intellectual. It's higher than the intellectual level, but it seeps and goes down, just like oil being poured on our heads. So now, as much as some people think that we're going back to the story from the beginning, that this person who went into the shul and heard the magical words of the Kaddish and didn't understand it, and we can say it was just because he didn't know the words. If he would have known the words, and no. But what really happened was that that experience gave him a glimpse. It was the first moment in his life that he suddenly felt the oil, the secrets of secrets, being poured down on top of his head. And that's really what happened. And later on, when he learns that, then he learns the meaning of the words, it doesn't become a secret anymore. But the experience that he had was vital, because it gave him the first taste of an experience that he should always have. You should never lack oil on top of your head, above your head. One should always walk around with this experience forever. Now, all this leads us to the main topic we want to talk about today, which is the upcoming holiday, Pesach, Passover. And the story, the commandment that we have to retell the story of the coming out of Egypt. Now, the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Vladi, also known as the Alter Rebbe in Chabad circles, or Baal HaTanya outside of Chabad circles, he initiated a certain term. He coined it, a very important Hasidic idea, which was also often quoted by the last Chabad Rebbe, which was Mitzrayim Dikdusha. Mitzrayim Dikdusha means holy Egypt, or the holy version of Egypt. Egypt as it exists on the side of holiness, right? So Egypt is a very negative term. Egypt is the first time we were ever enslaved, the first galut, the first diaspora. And also we know that Egypt in Hebrew, Mitzrayim, it also means Meitzarim, which means straits, something that constrains you, that limits you, just as the Jewish people were enslaved. And it stops you from revealing to yourself and to the world who you really are. So that's a very negative term. And every day we should aspire to come out of Egypt. That's why we remind ourselves of the coming out of Egypt every day in our prayers. We should aspire to come out of anything that constrains us or that it doesn't enable our souls to be revealed. So, but all this is just the negative Mitzrayim. It's Mitzrayim diklipa. That's the material, external Mitzrayim that can be easily identified. But there's also something, a holy kind of Mitzrayim. What is the holy kind of Mitzrayim? The holy kind of Mitzrayim should be the holy straits, holy constraints. There are some limitations. There are some things that limit you and that constrain you, but in a good way, in a positive way. So what are the holy Mitzrayim? The holy Mitzrayim are, very simply put, the commandments and all the details of Jewish law, halacha. Halacha is, right, we came out of Egypt not in order to be just aimlessly, ruthlessly free, because that's not real freedom. We came out of Egypt in order to enslave ourselves, quote unquote, but this time to a proper master, and that master is God. We don't want to be our own masters, because then we're going to lead very, very superficial lives, and we're going to wander around aimlessly in this world. So we don't want to be the servants of the slaves of Pharaoh. We do want to be slaves of someone, of something, but that someone should be our true creator who knows what's best for us. So coming out of Egypt, we're really putting ourselves, when we accept the Torah, into the constraints or the straits of the Torah itself. Everything that's prohibited, everything that we have to do, all the details of Jewish law that becomes our constraint. So this all makes sense, right? There's the negative kind of Egypt and the positive kind of Egypt. Again, quote unquote, it's the constraints, the very positive, constructive constraints that make our lives meaningful and balanced, and they make sure that we raise proper families and put our lives in order and put our day in order and so on. However, and this now comes the real revolutionary idea. The real revolutionary idea says that in a way, just as, although the second Egypt, the good Egypt, is again good and holy, the idea of coming out of Egypt should also, in a certain way, should be applied also regarding the holy Egypt. Now this is something far more interesting, because if we're saying that the holy Egypt is Jewish law, what does it mean to come out of Egypt? Because we're not talking about stopping to observe the law in any way. We're not talking about rebelling against our good master, which is God. Then what does it mean? How can you understand in any way, what does it mean that we should come out of the holy Mitzrayim, holy Egypt? So the idea is, this should be understood in the following way. It should be understood in the way that one should never suffice in defining to oneself that I am frum, I am religious, I am dati, I'm observant, this is what I do, and it's enough. It's enough. It's good enough. I'm a good enough Jew, and you settle for it. The whole idea of settling for little only applies to material things. If you have a little money, if you have a little property, you have a smaller home than what you may want, then you should be listapek bechelkecha. You should suffice what you have. What I have is good enough, and don't aspire to more than you need to aspire to. But in spiritual terms, it's the very opposite. One should always constantly aspire for more. And the moment one settles for a certain level of service regarding God, and says that's all I need, that's all I have, and that's it. It's good enough. I'm a good enough Jew. I'm observant. I'm dati. I don't need to do tshuva. For example, you see people saying, well, tshuva is for people who are outside of the religious circle, and they need to do tshuva, but not me. I'm already frum. I'm already religious. This kind of consciousness, that's the negative. That's the negative form of the positive of the holy Mitzrayim. If Jewish law becomes for you something that you only settle for what you can, what you already have, that becomes suddenly the positive constraints also become negative in some way, and now the idea, we can connect this to the idea of the oil constantly being poured, the experience of constantly having this oil of mysteries, the mysteries of mysteries that are poured above my head. Because if you have that experience, you're constantly coming out of even the holy kind of Egypt. Because if you don't have that experience, you could suddenly say, well, I have what I have, I know what I know, and that's enough. But if you're walking around, as we said before, shemen al roshcha al yichsar, walking around with the constant feeling that there's an infinite amount of secrets in the Torah that I haven't learned yet, that I need to have them, then that becomes, that sort of pulls you or prods you, provokes you to never accept, never just suffice in saying, well, that's the current level I have in service, and I don't need anything else. And we can say this now in a very beautiful way. If we're speaking about Mitzrayim de Klipa and Mitzrayim de Kedusha, the impure Egypt and the holy Egypt, then we should say the following: just as the impure Egypt, the unholy Egypt, had on top of it a ruler whose name was Pharaoh, also the positive kind of Mitzrayim should also have a certain kind, a positive kind of Pharaoh. Just like there is Mitzrayim de Kedusha, there's also Paro de Kedusha. So what do we mean by this? So first let's look at the word Paro. Paro is an Egyptian name, the title, Pharaoh. But Paro, written in Hebrew, alludes to the root para, pei resh ayin, and the root para means something that's wild, that's unkempt, that's crazy, that's bursting forth in a way that's unlimited by anything. And if Mitzrayim means straits or constrained, something that's very limited, very orderly, very sane, it constantly puts you in a box, then we know that the ruler on top of Mitzrayim was the very opposite. He was wild, he was crazy, he was irrational. You can almost say that Mitzrayim was like a fascist regime, Mitzrayim, straits, something that you can't move either to the right or to the left. You have to follow a certain path. Mitzrayim was like a fascist regime. However, its ruler, its dictator, was an anarchist, because Paro means really crazy. Parua, mitparea. And so imagine a kingdom full of people who are very orderly and very tidy, but their head, their king, is totally crazy. And in fact, we know that he regarded himself as a god. He said that I create myself, I've created myself. This is a verse from Ezekiel that talks about Paro as the great serpent that lies within its river and says, to me is my river belongs to me, and I have made myself, I've created myself. So assuming to be God and the ruler of the universe, that's a delusion of grandeur, right? It's craziness. And we can even see in the story of Egypt that the people of Egypt are relatively sane, whereas Paro is very evidently insane. As the plagues are increasing, then the people of Egypt are telling to to their king, let's release the slaves. We can do without the slaves. Enough with the plagues already. But Paro says no. And his heart becomes hardened and hardened again and again. He's completely irrational. He's putting in his entire kingdom on sort of like a suicide mission. And especially in the end, after the 10th plague hits and he releases, he regrets, and he takes whatever remains of his army, and they go after the Jewish people, and they all drown. And because they're led by this madman, this crazy person who has no constraints, no limitations, and is completely irrational. He never listens to his closest advisors. So in Hebrew, one of the words for crazy is mufra. Mufra is someone who is like Paro. Now again, if there is a positive kind of Mitzrayim, there should also be a positive kind of Paro. Just like the negative Mitzrayim has a negative Paro on top of it, there should also be on the top of the positive Mitzrayim, a positive Paro. So what does this mean? This really means that again, we're tying together everything we're talking about from the very beginning. It means that as we're serving God, we should have two levels. One level is the level of holy Egypt. Holy Egypt is holy constraints, holy limitations, the constraints of halakha, the constraints of Jewish law. I know what I have to do. I know what I mustn't do. I know what I'm allowed to do. And this puts my life in order. And this is my holy Egypt. But as we said before, there is a certain way in which even this kind of Egypt we have to come out of. And how do we come out of it? We have to put on top of it a holy Paro, a holy Pharaoh, holy madness, holy craziness. This is the oil on top of our heads. The oil that's coming from above our heads and being poured down, the mystery of mysteries that's beyond reason, beyond rationality. Bearing that in mind, remembering this at all time, is like putting a holy kind of Pharaoh, a holy kind of someone who's open-headed, open-minded. He's not closed-minded. He's not just saying, well, there's the law, the letter of the law, and I have to stick by this. He's also constantly listening to God's secrets, to God's whispers, to the things that are irrational, that are being whispered in our heads at all time. So the Zohar speaks about this. The Zohar, we mentioned the Zohar before because it's written in this very beautiful and mysterious Aramaic. So the Zohar talks about there being a holy Paro somewhere in the higher worlds. And he says the house of Paro is the house from which all the lights and all the sparks, the holy sparks of reality, burst forth from. It's a very high element or high place somewhere in the spiritual worlds that's the source of all the different sparks that are scattered throughout reality, throughout life. So, right, because Paro means to scatter or to, again, break the limitations, break the boundaries, and burst forth. So Beit Paro is, in Aramaic, it goes, Beita deitpari'u ve'itgalyan minei kol nehorin ve'kol butzinin. The house from which all the lights and all the sparks burst forth and are revealed. So this is the holy Paro, Paro de Kedusha. Ultimately, it's really God. God himself is the infinite, boundless, crazy, but in a good way. He created this crazy world, so he must be a very creative being, and he's unlimited completely. He can create whatever he wants. He can now drive the entire world crazy with a virus that nobody understands, and nobody can know for sure what the future holds. But he's doing this because that's part of his freedom. He's free to do this. He's not just like someone who's constrained or limited and wants everything to be orderly. He likes a combination of orderliness and disorderliness and craziness. So going back to us, in order to truly serve Hashem, we should connect to Hashem on both levels. When He gives us the Torah, and He gives us the commandments and the Jewish law, He's giving us a replacement for Egypt, a holy Egypt, holy constraints, holy limitations. He's telling us this would keep you sane, this would make sure you don't deteriorate into very, materialistic, hedonistic places that people may come to. This would make sure you're healthy and that you keep your head on top of your shoulders, and you learn my Torah and understand it and act according to it. And I assure you that your life will be wonderful. However, you should also remember me. I am beyond my Torah. I am something infinite, not something finite. I am something boundless, not something bounded. I am something that exists outside of the order of things, even the order of the Torah, because I am infinite. I made the Torah, and I made you, and I made reality, and I made every trial and every tribulation you can think of. And in order to be ready to face those trials and tribulations, you need to connect with me also on a level that's beyond the holy constraints of the Torah. So when I gave you the Torah, I gave you a replacement for Egypt. But you also need a replacement for Pharaoh, because Egypt does not exist without Pharaoh on top of it. The negative version is this fascist regime ruled by an anarchist, by a mad anarchist. But the positive version is you performing the mitzvot, observing the Torah, but constantly keeping your head above the waters, your head attuned to the infinite mysteries of divinity, of godliness, which is really the oil that you need to constantly feel that's being poured on top of your head. Of course, that's a very monarchic, majestic, kingly image, because kings, to this day, in England at least, they start their regime, they ascend the throne when oil is poured on top of their heads. This is, right, even the word Mashiach, Messiah, means someone who was anointed in oil. So the idea is that this oil that's poured on top of our head, this is the king within us, the Pharaoh, again positive, Pharaoh within us. This is our crown, the crown that's above our heads. Again, now everyone is talking about the crown because the coronavirus alludes to crown, and it's all meant to remind us of our crown. It reminds us of what we don't understand, what we should have faith in regard to it. So the idea is that you need the sanity of Jewish law, of halakha, of the commandments, and you need the insanity, so to speak, of being connected to an infinite God. Being connected to an infinite God means being a little bit crazy and just going for a life of faith. And also, we all know that within the commandment themselves, some of them make sense, but some of them don't. Some of them are crazy commandments. You don't know what they mean. So you need to have a part of you that accepts the irrational, mysterious elements of the Torah. Even within the Torah, you need this. So this is the two levels that we should all have. And they provide us with, so to speak, replacements for both Egypt and Pharaoh, the positive, holy versions of both. Now we can see this beautifully in the Passover Seder night. On the night of the Seder, what does Seder mean? Seder means order. That's literally what it means. It's called as this way because it's a very orderly procedure that we're going throughout the Seder night. There are 15 stages. We have a book. It's like a guidebook, and we follow it step by step. Kaddish ulchat, karpas yachat. We do every step, and it's like a Monopoly game. We go from one square to the next square, and it's very, very orderly. Not only is it orderly, there's something quote unquote squarish about this. What do I mean? I mean that most of the Haggadah books are squares, as all books are, but it's not just that. It's that there are a lot of fours within the Haggadah, right? There are the 4 questions. There are the 4 sons. There are the 4 cups of wine. There are the 4 words, synonyms for salvation. Different arba leshonot shel geula, different words referring to salvation coming out of Egypt. And in fact, this whole thing is, the whole Haggadah is really like an interpretation of 4 consecutive verses. That's the hidden quartet within. So there are 4 quartets that are revealed. Again, the sons and the questions and the glasses of wine and the different words for salvation. And then there is a hidden 4, which is the 4 verses. But there is also a 5th element to each one of them. And the 4 means that it's, like I said, it's squarish. It's very orderly. So when I'm sitting at the Seder, I'm going over the different 4 elements, and it's very orderly and squarish, and it makes sense. But there has to be the 5th element, the element that's going beyond the square, beyond reason, beyond what makes sense. So there's a 5th glass of wine that we don't drink. We leave it for Eliyahu. There is a 5th word of salvation which appears when you open the verses. He talks about V'yavi'enu, which means to bring us into the land of Israel. That's the purpose of coming out of Egypt. And there's, according to Chassidut, there's a 5th son. The 5th son is the son that's not in the Seder night. He's outside. You have to bring him. He's the Baal Tshuva. That's what all the Chabad houses are for. And this year, we can't have public Seders. So that means we have to be the 5th son. We have to feel like we are outside of Judaism, coming inside. We're traveling in India or South America or wherever, and now we're coming into the Seder. That's how we should feel, because we don't have visitors. So the idea is really that there is really 2 levels to the Seder night as well. The revealed level is very orderly. It's a Seder. It's very mesudar. It's really a holy Egypt. There are a lot of constraints. You have a lot of halachot. You can't have any chametz in the home, and you have to follow all the rules and all the steps of the Haggadah. And that's the Seder. And you should, when you follow the Seder, you can say to yourselves, Ani beseder. I'm in order. I'm okay. I'm all right. I'm doing all right. I'm a kosher Jew, and I'm doing what I was supposed to do. I left Egypt, but I'm not an anarchist. I'm not aimless or rootless. God gave me the Torah. He gave me halacha. I have the Haggadah, and I follow the Haggadah, and I'm beseder. Ani beseder. But there's another level. If you really want to taste the taste of freedom, if you really want to understand what coming out of Egypt in the fullest sense of the word means, you also have to a little bit come out of the holy Egypt as well. That means that as we're sitting in the Seder, our head has to be a little bit above the Haggadah, above the Seder, outside of the table. Maybe that's one of the reasons we're not really sitting properly most times in the Seder. We're leaning sideways. You can say that leaning sideways means you're coming out of the Seder a little bit. And what are you doing there? You're connecting to the holy Pharaoh within you. There's a part of you that needs to be lo beseder. Ani lo baseder. I'm not in the Seder. Ani lo beseder. I'm not all right. The degree in which I'm serving Hashem right now is not enough. I need to aspire to an infinitely more. So this experience of being outside of the Seder, which is really being attuned to the irrational, to the unexpected, to what you haven't planned, to what you don't know, to why all this is happening, to why are your kids ruining all the plans you made for this evening, for why davka in this evening, something that you don't expect happens, your electricity suddenly fail, and one of the main courses is burnt. Whatever happens, there's always unexpected things that happen. You should say, the wonderful, this is an opportunity to really come out of Egypt. There's the order, and there's what's above order, what's out of order. I'm in order, ani beseder. I also need to be a little lo beseder, or lo baseder, not in this seder. That's how we really come out of Egypt. You both have the holy Egypt, but on top of it you have to have the holy Pharaoh. That's where all the sparks, all the lights come from. It's open-minded, it's crazy, it's laughing, it's smiling, it's not trying to be in control of everything. It's okay with not being in control of everything. It's the opposite of the crazy control freak that Pharaoh, the negative Pharaoh was. Is the holy Pharaoh is the exact opposite. He's free, he's crazy, but in a sense that he's letting go of trying to control everything. He's looking at things unfold, and he's listening to God's sense of humor, to what God is trying to surprise us with or teach us that's deeper than what is written in the Haggadah. So this is really like the fifth element. All the fifth elements are allude to this level of this oil that's being poured on our heads, that's outside of the order of things. The fifth cup that we don't drink, the messianic horizon of coming to the land of Israel in the future, not just coming out of Egypt, and being the fifth son who's coming into the Seder for the first time. He's from the outside. He's never done the Seder before, or he's just traveling the world. But now for the first time he's experienced the Seder because he's an outsider. He's free. He's a free spirit. And maybe we can, each one of us can maybe invent a fifth question. A fifth question is not one of the four questions we have, but a new question. Try and come up this year with a new question. Write down a new question of what makes this evening different than all other evenings, because every evening is different. And every year in Passover we want to be different. But in order to experience this, we need to be open-minded. We need our heads to be above the water, above the Seder, and outside. And we'll finish with just two beautiful gematrias. I kept repeating the two terms, ani beseder, I'm all right, I'm in order, and ani lo beseder, I'm not all right, I'm out of order, I'm outside of the Seder. So ani beseder equals yeshiva. Yeshiva means, well, yeshiva, just like the Jewish study, but it also means sitting down. Usually when we sit at a table, we sit down. We don't lean sideways. We sit down by the Seder, and I study in a yeshiva. Ani beseder, I'm all right, I'm okay, I'm in order, I'm a good frum Jew, I do what needs to be done. But so mitzuyan, it's good that you're beseder. I also want you to be beseder, says Hashem. That's why I gave you the Torah and the Haggadah. But also, again, there's the fifth element, and there's the holy Paro, and that means to be also ani lo beseder. And ani lo beseder equals Mashiach. Mashiach, Messiah, our Savior. His name, his title, Mashiach, which also, as I said before, means anointed with oil, the oil that's above your head. Mashiach equals, in Gematria, ani lo beseder. Mashiach knows to tell of himself, ani lo beseder, I'm not all right, I'm not in order. And in order for each one of us, to be connected to our crown, to the oil that's above our head, to the messianic element within us, we need also to be able to tell ourselves, ani lo beseder, ani lo baseder. I'm not all right, I'm not perfect, and there's infinite more things to learn, more and more secrets, and when I compare myself to this, then I'm not all right. I have so much to learn, so much to understand, and you're connected to your weaknesses, to what you don't know, not just what you don't control, not just what you control. And you're outside of the Seder, you're not all right, you're out of order, but you're connected to the Pharaoh within you. So these are the two levels of serving Hashem in general, but more in particular about how to go in to the Seder night, especially in this year, which is such a unique year, that we're each one of us, wherever we are in the world, we're going to perform the Seder without having guests, If you have a Chabad house, it's without having all the guests you're used to. Sometimes it's very big seders. You're just going into more and more into your houses. So you're within your four walls, and you're just around your small table with your immediate family. But as you're sitting down for the Seder, your head, your mind, your heart needs to be free from the constraints that have been imposed upon us by this new situation in reality. We're limited, we're constrained, but we're also not constrained. Our minds, our souls are infinite, and they're free. And then when you open up to this level, especially when you're combining these two levels, because if you're just crazy and you're not also sane, that's very bad. But it's also very bad if you're just sane and you're not crazy at all. You have to have a combination of sanity and craziness, of the Seder and outside of the Seder. And when you have this, then you really, really are coming out of Egypt. שיהיה לכולנו פסח כשר ושמח. May we all have a wonderful, happy, joyful, and kosher, because we have to be sane also, Seder, each and every one of you. And I will see you, the next shiur will be after Pesach. Pesach, kasher v'samech.